Well, welcome back to our second session of Making Sense of Your World, a Biblical Worldview. And hopefully you got a chance to watch the first session because that session was really an introduction to this idea of worldviews. Tonight, what we're going to do is really dig into what the different worldviews are. And just as a reminder, this is based off of a book called Making Sense of Your World, a Biblical Worldview, and you can see it here. This teaching is part of my program that I'm going through called the Colson Fellows Program, which, again, you will find links to the Colson Center and the Colson Fellows Program on the page where this video is. So tonight, you're going to get fed through a fire hose because we're going to really go through and introduce the different worldviews that are out there and really give you an idea of how they stack up against what we believe a biblical worldview is true reality. So this really looks at these different worldviews. So we need to think worldviewishly. That's a tough word right there, worldviewishly. And the reason is because the Lord tells us to. He says, I am not of this world, and do not conform to this world. Well, what happens is that's exactly what we do. We conform to this world. We showed these stats last week, but I'm going to probably show them over and over again. 69% of Americans self-identify as Christians. That's wonderful. It's going down, but it's still a vast majority of Americans consider themselves self-identified as Christians. The problem is that only 6% of those who identify as Christians, according to this study, have a true biblical worldview. That means that, in all honesty, only 6% of Americans really have a biblical worldview, even though they consider themselves Christians. So they're not living coherently to what they think they are. And what you see at the bottom of this screen here is that 88% of Americans have this synchronism, and I always mess up the word, but this blending of worldviews, meaning they don't have a strict biblical worldview. They have maybe a little bit of Christian worldview, a little bit of humanistic, a little bit of naturalistic, all these different things. So what happens is they're not thinking coherently as a foundation of their beliefs. And as a review, a worldview is a framework of our most basic beliefs that shape our view of and for the world. And it is the basis of our decisions and our actions. Even though we may not even consciously realize we have a worldview, we do have a worldview. And we'll talk a lot about that as this course goes on. Now, you're going to see this over and over again because these are the big questions. Origin. What's the nature of ultimate reality, and where did I come from? Is there a God? Meaning. What is there? Something. Why is there something rather than nothing? What is the meaning of life? What is the purpose of life? These are these big questions that we need to wrestle with. Morality. Why does it seem that there's something wrong with the world? Where does right and wrong come from? If you were watching on the YouTube channel, I had a wonderful, really, honestly, a postmodernist type person. I'm using a big word there. You're going to learn what that word means today. Who was basically having a nice conversation with me. But where does right and wrong come from? Where does our identity come from? What does it mean to be a human being? Who am I? Why am I here? How do I fit in? Destiny. Where am I going? What happens? What is history leading to? These are the big questions. And as we talked about last week, this is all review, the worldview is where we should start, because at the bottom, the foundation is our worldview. Worldview leads to our values, and our values lead to behaviors. Unfortunately, because people do not think worldviewishly, it gets totally backwards. We focus in on behaviors that our behaviors lead to values and our values lead to worldview. If we do this, if we live life in reverse, meaning we live and think about the behavior versus the worldview, we live in it's a volatile way to live. And it's also vulnerable to basically the whims of the reality that we live in today. It's the whims of, Fox News, CNN News, whatever it may be. It's what somebody talking head is telling you, and we just go back and forth between what we're told, and we just believe them. We don't have that worldview foundation. So our thoughts, our behaviors, the decision making is volatile and it's vulnerable to attack. That's why we need a strong worldview. And in order to really get a strong worldview, we have to understand the worldviews that are out there competing with a biblical worldview today. So, how do you organize a worldview? You could organize it geographically, which makes perfect sense. Think of the United States right now. Don't even think of a different country. Think of the United States. Texas has a different worldview and culture than, say, New York City or California. So we could do it geographically, meaning do we have a worldview that is an Eastern worldview versus a Western worldview? That's very appropriate. We could do it ethnically by our ethnicity. Whew, these big words get me sometimes. Meaning, do we have a Chinese worldview versus a European or a United States worldview? That's a good way to classify it also. But what we're going to do is we're going to use God, using the ultimate reality as our starting point. We divide major worldviews into 3 major groups, but it's really 4. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. But the way we're going to look at it is how we look at God. All right? A naturalism or a naturalist worldview, a transcendental worldview, or a theist worldview. And we're going to add one more because this one is the one that's really starting to be pervasive in our world today, and that is a postmodern worldview. So let's look at these 3, and then we'll look at the postmodern. A naturalist, we know this one. It includes worldviews that suggest ultimate reality is limited to the physical world, the physical matter of the universe. This is atheism. This is basically there is no God. Everything we see is all we know, and that's it. All right. Transcendentalism is sort of the flip side of that, mostly Eastern religions, Buddhism, Hindu, and that is that what we see ultimately in reality is only spiritual or psychic, mental. So a transcendentalist thinks that everything is spiritual. Now, a theism, that refers to a worldview that is basically a personal God who created both the material world, the physical world, and the spiritual universe. So that's the 3 main ones. What we get, though, is something that's on us today, postmodernism. Truth is not knowable. So we go back, these 3, truth is knowable, but with postmodernism, truth is not knowable. Truth and reality are social constructs, meaning society comes up with it. Man, when you get into postmodernism, which we're in the depths of right now in our culture, reality is not knowable, so you make it up. That's what we're seeing. And this is a beautiful chart. You're going to see this over and over again. It will be, you can download this presentation, so you can download all of this and dig into it a little bit more. In fact, I suggest you do, because I'm feeding you with a fire hose. You can look up all of these different things and study this for yourself. But you get this idea that ultimate reality is either knowable or unknowable. If it's knowable, is it naturalism, meaning it's only a physical world? Is it transcendentalism, which means it's a spiritual world? Or is it theism? That means it's a personal God. If it's not knowable, then it's postmodernism. And then you see all below here these ideas and expressions of each one of these. So take a look at this, chew on it. It's a lot, but it's hopefully at the end of this presentation, you'll have a little bit better idea when you hear ideas expressed where they fit into. And trust me, it's never neat. It's never neat and tidy. So let's keep going. We're having fun, right? So last week we talked about what we need to think about when we are thinking of these ultimate questions, and that is, how do they relate to God, humanity, and nature? And that's what we're going to look at today. And again, last week we talked about this idea of this fourth idea of how do these truths, how does this ultimate reality relate to me? And I give you a term here called expressive individualism, where the belief that each person must act based on the expression of his or own core beliefs or feelings or intuitions. So postmodernism is this idea that truth is what I make it. Truth and reality are what I say they are. That's where we get into the transgender movement and this whole idea of I can change my biology. I'm not a male or a female, but I am non-binary. That's all expressive individualism. And it goes deeper than that, but that's just one example of it. So here's our chart again. Here's our ultimate questions again. And now, and I went through that really quick. Now, let's look at those ultimate questions: origin, meaning, identity, morality, destiny. Here's a very quick chart that you can look at that tells you how they stack up. Naturalism, origin is just natural causes, it is by chance. Transcendentalism, we're all one divineness. Theism, God created it. Identity, hey, self-conscious animals, that's all that we are in naturalism. Transcendentalism, expressive of the oneness, the divine oneness. Hey, theism, identity comes from a special creation of God. And you can see how each one of these goes through. I'm not going to read each one of them, but you have this chart and you can see where things are different. All right. Naturalism thinks of these questions of origin, identity, meaning, morality, and destiny different than transcendentalism, different than theism. This is the basis of worldview, which leads to values, which leads to behavior. People don't think of this. All right. They don't think through the big questions. And so what happens is you get this synchronicity, which means that we pick and choose from each one of these categories. So I may, as a Christian, believe that, hey, God created everything, but you know what? I really like this New Age thing that God is in everything. Well, okay, wait a second. That's not a true biblical worldview. That's not a true thing. So all of a sudden, we start picking and choosing from each one of these questions, these categories, and we don't get a true biblical worldview. We pick and choose. Sometimes we do it consciously, but most times we do it unconsciously. And then our values and behaviors are dictated off of that, which we've never thought through. So we're going to go through now and look a little deeper at each one of these. Naturalism, which is the predominant worldview of today, you can think of it as secular, projects that the view that ultimate reality is material. The physical universe is all there is. There's nothing beyond or separated from that which we can see, touch, and measure. Matter and energy are the basic stuff from which all existence is derived. Such a view of reality implies that all obtainable answers for the questions related to the universe and mankind can be found by the investigation of the physical phenomena. Most naturalists would not deny the real existence of such things as thoughts, uh, plans, language, and so on, but would claim that these things are explainable as a form and function of some material entity. Meaning, uh, postmodernism will basically say that language is a construct made by man, and you can't understand it. Where a naturalist will say, I can understand it. Okay, so naturalism is that we see the ideas of naturalism in materialism, positivism, secularism, scientism, atheism, agnostics, and then it's expressed in secular humanism, Darwinism, Marxism, all of this kind of fun stuff. That's how it's expressed. But the ideas of all of these different sort of sub worldviews, if you want to say it, are all derived from this naturalism idea. And ideas have consequences. So when you look at the things that we talked about, how naturalism looks at God, humans, and nature, well, naturalism, there is no God. There is no supernatural. All right. From a life standpoint, life comes from dust. And guess what? That's where you're going from. So we're just apes. We're just animals. We've evolved from chance. And with nature, hey, it's exactly what it says. Everything comes from, and are derived from nature. You get the mother nature idea. And that's it. So it's really becomes survival of the fittest if you want to think about how you live. I mean, because if we're just random chance, there is no God. We came from the dust. We're going back from the dust, and nature is all there is. Well, think about it. I mean, take that to its end. Where does right and wrong come from? Why should I not take for myself? Because if it's just pure survival of the fittest, well, shoot, just go for it, man. Live, have fun. Now, transcendentalism is a little different. In fact, it's the opposite. Transcendental thought is based on the fundamental idea that all things are unified whole, a concept known as monism. Everything that exists comes from the same stuff. There is no essential difference between a rock and a tree, a cow and a man. Okay, this is where you get this idea of climate change and it being such a big deal. Because think about it, we're all one with nature. So all objects are separate, manifest in different forms of one's own reality. This ultimate reality is spiritual or psychic in nature. And in this way, transcendentalism denies naturalism, basic tense, that all reality is material. It's like the complete and total opposite. So everything is spiritual. Everything is the universe. We are all just part of the universe. And I have no more value as a human being than the tree has value or the cow has value. It's a big difference. Now, this transcendental, the ideas of this are pantheism, polyism, atheism, anti-theism. There's all these things. The big one that you will know is New Age philosophy. All right, you see this in Eastern religions. You see this in Scientology, and you see that in Wicca. I mean, so everything is spiritual. From an ultimate reality standpoint, is transcendentalism. So now we get us. Transcendentalism, I forgot to give you this slide. Basically, it's seeing reality as we are all just one divine creature. Now, that divine creature is not God per se, but we're just out there. We have, as humans, no more value, and you see this in Buddhism. You have no more value than an ant, because the ant could have been a reincarnated being. Oh my goodness! So you get all of that. So theism is where we fall into. And again, I'm going really fast here, and take the notes, chew through it a little bit, but I'm going fast because I'm trying to keep these lessons short. So theism, hey, that's a belief that there's an existence of God. You see this in traditional theism, Islam, Judaism, Christianity. You see it also in deism. Okay, deism believes that there's a God, but he may not be personal. He's just a watchwinder. So we see that our relationship with God, he's a personal being who is separate from the natural world. Humans, the relationship that we have with humans are a special creation of God. We are made in the image of God. That is a huge difference from a value standpoint. And theists believe that God created the universe out of nothing. All right. He did not form the universe out of pre-existing material, as was thought by the Greeks, but instead he brought matter and energy into existence. And I'll say this, that if you look at the Bible, and sometimes this is difficult for our Western culture to grasp, there is a physical universe and there is a spiritual universe. They are working together. We only see the physical universe, but we know that there's a spiritual universe because at times it manifests itself or reveals itself to us. But there is both, all right? And when we look at, we miss that point a lot. We miss the spiritual part because of our Western culture mind. That's where you get the idea that these worldviews sometimes aren't pure. Okay, great comparison here, and I'm not going to read it, but it's there for you. Here are the three great theistic religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And the idea here with this chart is to get an idea of the differences between them. All three of these religions believe in a God, all right, but they believe in a very different way. Judaism and Christianity obviously are very much closer together than Islam, but Islam is sort of it's out there too from a standpoint of being related to these three. I'll let you look at that chart on your own. It is quite interesting to see. We think of Islam and it is 600 years later from Christianity. It's almost 3,000 years away from Judaism, from Moses and Abraham. So yeah, it is a very recent religion. So let's hit this postmodernism, because this is where reality in our culture is going towards, and it's very, very scary from the standpoint of postmodernism as a way of perceiving and explaining reality shared by thinkers in philosophy and language and science and sociology, the arts, architecture, management theories, theology that arose in the West during the last half century. And it is a reaction to modernity. I pronounce it terribly, sorry. And at its most basic core, postmodernism involves the reality of ultimate bankruptcy of modern and pre-modern approaches to life. It is like the antithesis, the opposite of a reality that can be known. Postmodernists believe that you cannot know truth. I mean, they take it to the point that that language, you can't even understand language. Words don't have meanings because you explain the meanings of words by other words. Totally the opposite of Christianity, where John says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. You ever think of that from a language standpoint? So postmodernism blows that out. Ultimate reality in postmodernism is unknowable. Everything that we have is a social construct, and it's really at its heart expressed in deconstructionism. And that's what we're seeing now in our culture, especially in America, where truth no longer matters, because truth is unknowable. Truth is what you make it. you look for truth inside versus looking to, in our case, the scripture and God for our truth. Postmodernism is the fight that we have to fight within a worldview thought and mind structure. It's crazy. And we think of postmodernism as something really new. But in essence, it has been a slow drip to this idea of there is no truth, there is no reality. I got to tell you, it is strictly 100% demonic, because it basically says there is no God, and goes beyond that, there is no truth. And truth and reality are what you make of it. So again, I'm not going to read this chart to you, but it is out there for you to look at. Postmodernist needs to be in the top of your head, because the world is moving from a secular, what would be called naturalism viewpoint, worldview, to a postmodern, and that has incredible consequences across every spectrum of life. It's crazy. So look at the theistic distinctions, okay? Our common belief is God exists, okay? Naturalism says, no, God does not exist. Our common belief says God is personal. Well, transcendentalism says, no, God is not personal. God is everything. And then God, we think God has revealed his truth about himself and the world to us through his scripture. Postmodernists will tell you there is no truth. There is no ultimate reality. This is the fight. Right here, that's the fight. That is the thing that we have to deal with when talking to people, and when talking to people about God. If they come from the standpoint of God doesn't exist, well, it's naturalism. Okay, good. We can talk about that. If it's God isn't personal, well, that's transcendentalism. Well, we can talk about that. And then, boy, the tough one is there is no truth. Whoa, boy, we got problems with that one, because how do you prove to somebody that there is truth, there is reality, when they just want to make up their own reality? It's crazy. So this chart, you will see over and over again. What I suggest is look at this, look up these words, look up these ideas, look up these expressions, and sort of get in your mind what these mean, because there's a lot there going on. All right, but the ultimate thing is these major categories. Naturalism, it's only a physical or material world. Transcendentalism, it's only a spiritual world. Theism, hey, guess what? There's both, and it's made by a personal God. All of those are knowable. And then postmodernism, hey, it's unknowable. Everything, truth and reality, the ultimate reality is what we make of it. You can't know it. Those are the four real big chunks, groupings of worldviews, and everything that's these ideas and the expressions of it are down below. So this is a great chart to look at. And as we sort of close today, I want to hit this point hard. From a biblical perspective, our worldview comes from the fact that God created this universe, that he gave us free will, and part of that free will was us going off the tracks and sin entering the world, which is the fall. All right? But there was an ultimate redemption through Jesus Christ coming to this world, and his works, the atoning works of Jesus Christ, that redeems us. And then there's ultimately a restoration of what God's original plan and creation was and still is. Creation is still good, meaning what we see in the world today to God is still good. It's just been distorted and vandalized, if you want to use that word, by the fall, by sin. Not only us, but creation as a whole, that we read in Scripture. And these big questions of origin, meaning, identity, and destiny, these are the big questions, all right? So we get to, I always like to say, the end of this lesson, which is, so what? You have to think worldviewishly. Because if you don't consciously think and evaluate your worldview beliefs, you're going to end up catching them. Everybody has a worldview, or a worldview has you. And so we don't want to go through life like, catching a cold with our beliefs, our philosophies, our worldview. So when you catch a cold, you just sort of absorb it. And that's what can happen to us if we don't intentionally think of those big questions. All right? Those big questions of origin, meaning, morality, identity, and destiny. These are the big questions that you have to answer in order to have a strong worldview, because otherwise you're going to catch your worldview. And God tells us right here in James and throughout the Bible, whoever wishes to be a friend of the world sets himself as an enemy of God. If we don't have a biblical worldview and we take our worldview from the world, we are setting ourselves against God. And the problem that we run into, especially in our world today, it used to be you could say fast food generation, but we've gone way past that. We are instant knowledge, iPhone, everything type people, is we don't think big thoughts. We don't think of those big questions. We just think of the behavior that happens, and we don't like that behavior, but we don't think of the why questions. Where did we come from? Why are we here? What's our purpose? Where are we going to? So as you go through this class, think about those questions and what that means to you in how you have your values set and how your behavior is, and then also how you identify what's going on in the world, and really bump them up against not your values, not your behaviors, but against the worldviews for where they come from. Because those are the questions that are ultimately what people are doing behavior-wise. Hope you enjoyed this one. I know this was a ton. Look at the notes that they're available on the website and on the app. Get the app if you haven't gotten the app, because that's the best way to do it. But we'll also send these videos out in many different forms. Also, please comment, give me questions, in dialogue with this stuff. All right. If it doesn't make sense to you, if I've gone too fast, tell me. All right. This is going to be just a great discussion through the next 10, 11 weeks. Next week, we end sort of this first part of the differences a worldview makes, and it's going to be putting worldviews to the test. You don't want to miss that, because that's really where you get to the meat and potatoes of this. How do you put your worldview to the test so that you know that you have a worldview? And then the next section, we really go, that's when we get into sort of the Bible. We really get into really why we believe what we believe and where we get that within scriptures, so that then we can get to part 3, which really has to deal with, how do we apply this? How do we live today with all the craziness that's going on? Hope you've enjoyed it. If you have questions, post them. If you need anything, holler, and we'll be here for you. Until next time, you all take care, and thanks for watching.